They had everything in common, except their fathers. The new employee was unlike any other. Even after 3 months of working for the powerful crime boss, he couldn't get over how much she looked like his late father. And not just her appearance, but also the way she moved and spoke. He felt a connection to her that went beyond the professional. Tony Montana was used to women throwing themselves at him. He was a successful crime boss with a lot of money and power, but this new addition to his company wasn't like the others. She didn't give him the time of day. In fact, she hardly even acknowledged his existence. He first noticed her the moment she walked through the doors of his office. She was beautiful, yes, but there was something else about her, something that he couldn't quite put his finger on. He tried to shake it off. After all, he had seen hundreds of beautiful women in his life. What made this one so different? Her name was Isabella Rossi, and she was the best in her field. He had heard rumors about her before she arrived at his company. A young woman who had clawed her way to the top, taking down everyone who had ever wronged her. He had been intrigued, so when she applied for a job at his company, he had called her in for an interview. The interview had lasted less than 30 minutes. He could tell right away that she was smart and ambitious. But there was something else about her that he couldn't quite put his finger on. He had offered her the job on the spot, but from the way she had looked at him, he knew that she had no intention of accepting. Yet 2 days later, she showed up at his office, looking as though she owned the place. He had been surprised when she had accepted the job, but he was even more surprised by her attitude. She was confident, almost cocky. It was clear that she wasn't afraid of anything or anyone, and then he had noticed the tattoo. It was a small thing, a single rose on the back of her neck. But to him, it had been like a red flag. You see, he had a rose tattoo too, the same rose that she had on her neck. But his was bigger, bolder, and it covered his entire back. He had tried to ignore it, but it had become impossible to deny. She was like a shadow of his past, haunting him at every turn. He had done everything he could to bury that part of his life, but here she was, bringing it all back to the surface. He couldn't help but wonder if she was some kind of undercover cop sent to bring him down. After all, he had been on the radar of the police for years. It wouldn't be surprising if they had finally decided to make a move on him. But as the weeks went by, he had begun to relax. He started to trust Isabella. Not enough to let her into his inner circle, but enough to believe that she wasn't a threat. He had seen the way she dealt with the other members of his crew. She didn't hold back. She was tough, maybe even too tough. But there was something about her that he couldn't understand. She was smart and ambitious, yet she seemed content to work for him without trying to climb the ladder. He had seen this look in her eyes before, the same look that had haunted him for years. He had thought that he had buried that part of his life, but here it was, staring back at him. Every time he looked into her eyes, he saw the ghost of his past. He saw the darkness that had consumed him for so long. One night, he had had enough. He called her into his office and confronted her. He demanded to know what she was hiding, what she wanted from him. She had looked at him then, and he had seen the truth in her eyes. She wasn't a cop. She wasn't out to get him. She was just Isabella Rossi, a young woman who was trying to make a name for herself in a man's world. He had seen that look before. He had seen that fire in her eyes. It was the same fire that had burned inside of him when he was younger, the same fire that had driven him to succeed. He had thought that he had extinguished that fire long ago, but seeing it in her had rekindled it within him. He had realized then that she wasn't a threat. She was an opportunity. He could teach her the ways of the world, show her how to navigate the treacherous waters that lay ahead. In return, she would bring a fresh perspective to his crew, a perspective that he hadn't had in years. He had taken her under his wing and taught her everything he knew. He had shown her the ropes, introduced her to the members of his crew. And what had surprised him the most was that they had accepted her without hesitation. He had seen the way they looked at her, the way they talked to her. They were intrigued by her, just as he had been. He had watched as she had risen through the ranks, quickly becoming one of the most trusted members of his crew. He had seen the way she commanded respect, the way she inspired loyalty. But as he watched her, he had also seen the darkness that was growing inside of her. He had seen the same darkness that had consumed him for so long. He had tried to warn her, but she wouldn't listen. She was too ambitious, too hungry for power. He had seen that look in her eyes before, the same look that had driven him to the edge. He had thought that he had conquered that darkness, but seeing it in her had brought it all back to the surface. He had tried to pull her back from the edge, but it was no use. She was too far gone. He had watched as she had taken his crew, his territory, his everything. He had tried to stop her, but it was too late. He was old. He was tired. He had seen the same darkness in her that had consumed him for so long. He had seen the potential for greatness, but also the potential for destruction. He had known that she was capable of great things, but he had also known that she would eventually be consumed by the darkness inside of her. He had seen it in her eyes long ago, the same eyes that had stared back at him from the mirror. He had tried to warn her, but she wouldn't listen. He had tried to stop her, but it was too late. All he could do now was watch as she destroyed everything he had built, as she became the very thing that he had feared the most. All he could do now was watch and hope that she wouldn't destroy herself in the process. As Tony sat in his chair, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride mixed with sadness. Pride because he had seen the potential in Isabella from the very beginning, but sadness because he knew that she would eventually pay the price for her ambition. He had seen it happen to so many people like her, people who had been consumed by the darkness that lurked within them. He had seen it happen to himself. So when he had noticed the rose tattoo on Isabella's neck, he had known that she was walking down a dangerous path. The rose was a symbol of power, but it was also a symbol of pain. Tony had chosen to cover his entire back with roses, a constant reminder of the power and pain that came with his lifestyle. He had hoped that Isabella would choose a different path, but he had known deep down that she wouldn't. As he watched her rise through the ranks of his crew, he had seen the same darkness that had consumed him begin to take root in her. He had seen it in her eyes, in the way she carried herself, in the decisions she made. He had tried to warn her, to pull her back from the edge, but it was no use. He had been a mentor to her, a father figure, but in the end, it wasn't enough. As Isabella took control of Tony's former crew, she knew that she was stepping into dangerous territory. She knew that she was taking on a legacy that was both powerful and dangerous, but she was ready. She had trained for this, prepared for this moment for years. She knew that she was capable of handling the responsibility of carrying on Tony's legacy. As she looked out over her crew, she saw the same potential for greatness and destruction that Tony had seen in her. She knew that they were capable of amazing things, but also that they were capable of terrible things. She knew that it would be up to her to guide them, to push them towards greatness while keeping the darkness at bay. She knew that it wouldn't be easy, but she was up for the challenge. She was ready to lead, ready to take on the world. The crew looked to her, their faces a mix of excitement and apprehension. They knew that they were entering uncharted territory, that they were about to embark on a journey that would change their lives forever. But they were ready. They were excited to see where Isabella would lead them, what they would accomplish together.